We are live.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Neff. I'm marketing manager at InterVarsity Press, and I am so delighted to have a conversation this morning with Dr. Lamar Hardwick. He is the author of this wonderful book. It is called Disability and the Church, A Vision for Diversity and Inclusion. And I'll tell you, every time I post about this book on social media, I hear from so many pastors who are like, my church needs this resource. So I commend this to you. I've heard so many good reviews about this book. I've read it. I loved it. And I also want to highlight that this is a praxis resource. InterVarsity Press has a segment of books in our praxis line, and those are designed specifically to equip Christian leaders I'm marketing manager in their work in the church or in community engagement. So go on ivpress.com and check out resources for church leaders, and you can read more about our praxis books. So Lamar, welcome. How are you this morning on this day after Easter? Are you exhausted?
Yeah, I'm good. Tired, but good tired. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so glad to have you here. I know you and I have had conversations before your book was launched
Hmm.
and about how we're going to get the book out into the world. And I've just really enjoyed so much your insight on this topic specifically. And I have really appreciated your story. And so
Mm.
I wonder if we might start there. If you can tell us a little bit about how your story intersects with this topic of disability in the church.
Sure. So I'll start by saying most people online have come to know me as the autism pastor.
Mm.
I should say, because I get questions about that, that's not actually a term I came up with. Years ago, I was diagnosed in December of 2014 with autism spectrum disorder. Um, and that comes after just decades of struggling with things I didn't know how to explain.
Mm.
So I knew probably around the age of 7 or 8 that there were significant differences between me and other children. The best description I can give is like the world was in on an inside joke that I didn't understand. And so I did what many in the autism community have come to know is called masking. So you do all the things that you see other people do because you don't want to stick out, you don't want to be bullied. But I knew around 7 or 8, and it wasn't until age 36 um, I hit what I call a proverbial wall, and I finally decided to try to get someone to help me to make sense of my life and why I struggled with relationships and understanding things. And so I was officially diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And so when I started writing about it in 2015, I had a woman who I don't even know where she is now, who said, you are like the pastor for the autism community
Mm.
because we don't have, many of us don't go to church. And so I became sort of their resource for spiritual care. And so autism pastor actually came from her. So I changed all my handles online because it just made it easier for people to find me.
Mm. Mm. That sounds like such a gift to the community too. And I am struck with how you described that, like your experience growing up, how it felt like everyone was in on something that you didn't know what that was about. That exclusion feels so hard,
Mm.
and I like how um, the way you talk about disability in the church. It's about inclusion.
Yeah.
That just struck me as a really powerful way to frame this. Um, and I'm sure that's obviously very intentional on your part. So it's not
Mhm.
just about offering a space over there for
Right.
those who are developmentally disabled or are on the autism spectrum, but it's about including.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that sort of prompted that is that that's the season that our culture and our faith communities are in, right? We are coming to realize, especially after, sort of the rough summer we had in this country last year, we're realizing that, a lot of what has been known to be right and true has come from one set of voices. And so now our culture is saying, we need more inclusion, we need more a variety of different voices and experiences to help shape everything from education to faith communities to, employment, because it's been primarily one set of voices that have decided what's right for everyone. So the push towards diversity and inclusion intersects with disability, because if we're talking about including minority voices and bring them to the table, what I found is that we have to actually start with what statistically is the largest minority group in the world, and that's persons with disabilities. That's about 20% of people in the world. About 1 in 5 have some sort of developmental, intellectual, or physical disability. And so if we're talking about inviting minority voices to the community, that's the community that's often overlooked. And so being able to include them into spaces where we can understand their experiences will also help shape this movement for diversity and inclusion. And I say this in the book, the disability community is the only minority group that you can join at any time for any reason. And so I think it's important for people to understand that while they feel as though it might impact them personally, we all know that, if you live long enough, actually, you'll become a part of this group, because at some point you'll need some assistance in helping your body function in a way that helps you to live as normal as possible. So it's a big issue, and that helped shaped the idea for the book.
It sounds like a justice issue.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I really appreciate your vision for this in the church context. And you are a pastor currently
Yep.
yourself.
Yes.
How have you seen this play out in your own context as far as efforts for inclusion? If you can give maybe a couple examples of a change maybe that has happened.
Yeah. So one of the biggest changes was when I disclosed my diagnosis to my congregation. It actually freed other people in the congregation who were wrestling with issues that they were too embarrassed to talk about because of the shame and stigma that's often associated with disability. And so what I learned is that the church has made that a taboo subject. And because of that, we don't even realize that there are people in our congregations or on the periphery of our congregations who are wrestling with a lot of issues. In the book, I talk about King David, how he lets us in on a secret of his life when he shows up to fight Goliath. For the first time, we learn that he's been fighting lions and bears, right? He says, I've fought lions, I fought bears. And it's almost to say that there are battles that I've been fighting that you have no idea about. And so I use that as an analogy to say that there are many people in our churches and on the periphery of our churches who are fighting battles and fighting lions and bears that we have no clue they've been fighting. And creating an opportunity for it to be okay to talk about those things helps us to get a better understanding of who we can dialogue with to help us better shape our churches, because they're there. If it's 1 in 5, even though we've made them a invisible community, it's still a very large community. And so we just need to make our churches safe places to talk about those things so that we can engage with the people in our community about how to do things better and invite them to the table to share with us how we need to do better as a church.
Yeah, that's good. That's helpful to hear. So can you kind of flesh out a little bit? What are we missing when we are not an inclusive community for those who are disabled in any way? And maybe specifically, since we're kind of around autism awareness, time. Let's see, the Autism Awareness Day was Friday, right?
Right.
So I guess maybe in relation to autism, what are we missing when we're
Hmm.
not being inclusive?
Yeah. So, and there's been lots of studies on this, like organizationally. I talk about in the book. Some of the organizations have done some research on this. Primarily, if you're talking about just inclusion in general, and this certainly applies to the disability community and the autism community specifically.
Hmm.
When we're not inclusive, we decrease the amount of learning and growth that can take place because again, we're only listening to and being shaped by stories of people who are very similar to us, which makes it very difficult then to be more inclusive, but also to learn more about the world and the way other people experience the world, the way that other people experience faith and God and the Bible. And so it significantly challenges our organizations to be the best that they can be because we're missing so many great opportunities to hear from people whose lives are dramatically different than ours. And so, I like to tell churches that we think our churches are great, but when we're not being inclusive, that we are at best only at half strength when we
Mm.
don't include people from the disability community. And then, as it relates specifically to autism, I can say this about myself, and I don't propose to speak for all people who are on the spectrum because
Hmm.
everyone's different. But I often tell people, if it's true, I think the stats now are 1 in 54. Um, and so, and I've said this to young people on the spectrum that I've mentored. If you're in the room with 53 other people, there's at least one thing that you can do that they can't. And so, what that means is that we bring a very different understanding of the world into contexts and spaces that primarily don't have experience with that. And it helps to bring balance, it helps to bring learning. It also helps to strengthen people's understanding, again, of God, of faith. I'm often the person in the room who always sees things differently. Um, but I think it's helpful because then we see life differently and we're able to
Hmm.
expand our understanding of God. So I would say, we're missing that when we don't include people with disabilities, specifically people
Hmm.
with autism. And the last thing I'll say about that is one of the primary images in the New Testament of the life of faith is this contest between what Paul calls flesh and spirit, right? Who better to teach us how to navigate that than people whose bodies are constantly doing things that they're not necessarily choosing? So I tell people that I live in a world that my brain is not necessarily built for, but you can see in the life of persons with autism and other persons with disabilities that there's this constant battle between flesh and spirit, literally. And they live a life of faith in a way that is dramatically different from just understanding that idea. Like that's a real thing for me.
Hmm.
Is my faith has to lead the rebellion against my body because sometimes my body does things that I don't want it to do. And
Hmm.
so for me personally, I've learned that it unlocks a whole other level of understanding God and faith because you're literally not just thinking about that as an idea. This is my life every day.
Hmm.
There's a war between what my faith says and what my body says I can do. So,
Hmm.
I think when we don't include people like that, we miss some of the important lessons that we can learn about spiritual growth.
Hmm. Yeah, I really I love the depth and richness and how um self-aware you are. I can see this as um something this offering of this different perspective, especially within the church context. Um, it can be affirmed and by the church community and can help enrich the life of that individual with a different perspective. I'm thinking back to how you described, being an outsider, and I could just keep on circling back to that thought of how can we be inclusive? How can we affirm these gifts and different perspectives that others, whoever, whatever their um, disability or mindset is, how do we include and affirm that
Mhm.
as a gift for the church? Hmm. I'm loving that. And I am also kind of going back to something you said earlier. Um, you said that disability is taboo in the church.
Mhm.
Why? Why do you think that is? Is it fear?
I think a large part of it may
Hmm.
be that. But quite honestly, I think that we haven't done enough work on learning how to talk about it.
Hmm.
Um, I also think that there's still some very bad teaching about it that has taken root in our churches over centuries. And so you'd be surprised to still hear that there are large contingencies of people, and I'm not saying this to be disparaging, but
Hmm.
there's still large contingencies of people within Christianity who still very much believe that persons who are disabled in any form still a result of sin or some sort of curse or the parents did
Hmm.
something wrong. And so you would think that those things would have changed over the years.
Hmm.
But I've surprisingly come across literally hundreds of families who've messaged me in some form or another who would say, yeah, that's still very much a prevalent thought in a lot of circles. And so I think some of it is fear. I think some of it is we've got to unlearn some of the things that we
Hmm.
initially thought, which is why it's so important to follow Jesus's lead, right? When he runs into the man born blind,
Hmm.
and his disciples ask him who sinned, him or his parents. And I like to tell people that's actually a ridiculous question, right? How much could an infant have sinned
Hmm.
that he was, blind from birth? But Jesus changes the question, right? He changes it from them asking why can't this man see to how can God be seen? When he says, neither of those things are true. It's so that God's glory can be seen in him. And so I think some of it too is for centuries we've been asking the wrong questions about these types of issues.
Hmm.
um, and Jesus sort of leads us in a different direction to say, okay, that's a good question, but the more important question is how can God be seen? How can we affirm the image of God in all of humanity? Because disability doesn't distract from that, it doesn't deter from that, and it doesn't make God's image more deficient in a body that is not quote unquote normal. So I think we need to go back to what is foundational about Christian faith is that we believe that humanity bears the image of God.
Hmm.
That means that there should be no exceptions to that. And if we can
Hmm.
go back to that, I think we can stop making it so taboo
Hmm.
because we can appreciate whatever it is that God is trying to do in the life of a person who may be differently abled, that God is very much still seen in that life.
Hmm.
So we've got a lot of work to do. I think it's
Yeah.
it's still something that we struggle with. And then I think also it's ignorance. We don't know enough about it. We haven't done enough education or exposing ourselves to people
Hmm.
who are definitely able or disabled to know
Hmm.
how to talk about it.
Hmm.
What should we say? How should we talk about it? What is acceptable? What
Yeah.
are some of the things that we have said over the years that have been hurtful that we need to stop saying? And so some of it too is proximity. If you notice in the book, I talk about how that population is missing. The problem with that is when they're missing, we don't get better at actually engaging.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And that part of your book broke my heart. Honestly, I think I cried a little at that point because if the church is not a welcoming place for, let's say, there's a child who has some needs, it's differently abled or disabled on the autism spectrum, or maybe has sensory issues. The church, as it's constructed, or how most services are, it's not welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
So they opt to stay home.
Yeah.
Of course they would. Of
Yeah.
course. So what I wonder if you have any thoughts for families who are kind of navigating this, maybe a way. to approach the church leadership, maybe? Would you recommend something like that for
Yeah,
education or conversation?
yeah. I'm glad you asked that. One of the things that I have discovered as I sort of traveled and did various disability ministry conferences is I get great people who come up to my table to talk to me after I've done a session. But I very rarely have seen any pastors at these conferences. Like it's usually family members,
Mm,
people who have some sort of personal stake in it, people who are enthusiastic and hopeful that they can go take this information back to their church and make a difference. And the thing that broke my heart and the reason why I wrote the book the way that I did is I wanted it to be theological enough for pastors, but also accessible enough for families to say, I've read this book and I can explain these concepts to my pastor who may not
mhm,
understand them. Um, so, so one would be to always look for great resources, and certainly, my book is one, but there's so many great resources out there written by other people. Um, it's a look for those resources and maybe give bite-sized pieces of information to your pastor. And I talk about it in the book. I'm a pastor. I get it. I know that we're busy. Like we have,
mhm.
it's hard to take one more book from one parishioner who says, "Hey, read
Yes.
this," right? But if you could take, combine that with your personal story, even if I encourage people, make a video of like what a day in your life is like for you,
Oof. Yeah.
and maybe time lapse it and send them a 3-minute video and say, this is what life is like for us. We need our church to support.
Mm,
Other resources, I would say tap into leveraging the people that your pastor respects. A lot of times, if they know that another pastor or another organization has been reading this material, it may prompt them to say, oh, well, I respect that group. I respect that pastor. Maybe that's something that I should look into. But then I also encourage families to, unfortunately, every church is not going to be for everyone, but there are a few things I even talk about in the book to say, here's things that you should look out for. For example, if you're looking for a church and you want it to be more inclusive, they may not have everything that you need up front, but look for churches that, for example, value people over programs.
mm,
A great example in my previous church that I pastored, where I helped start the ministry there before I left, is we had a family come in during the summer. We sort of shut down kids programming, only had it for a certain age and under, because we struggled to get volunteers, people on vacation. And then, once you hit Memorial Day, the tennis tends to go down.
yeah.
So for
Mhm.
about a 6 or 7 week stretch, we had it just for 5 and under. Well, we had a family that had 2 children that had special needs. And so we totally just redid the whole program just to accommodate them.
Mm,
So we weren't so stuck on the program that we had set in
mm,
place that we were willing to turn away a family.
mhm,
And so you got to look for churches that value people over programs. It was more important to us for them to stay and be welcome than it was for us to stick to what we had already planned.
mm,
Also, look for churches that value circles over rows. I talk about in the book. And so if you find a church that is focuses a lot on small groups, whether
mhm.
that's Sunday school, home groups, whatever it looks like, they tend to have a higher value for relationship. And that tends to go a long way in helping them to learn how to become more inclusive, because for them, it's not just about sitting in rows on Sunday morning. It's
Mhm,
about connecting people with other people. And stories change people's hearts, right?
mhm,
So if you have that sort of um, relationship building type of church, then it's easier for you to try to find your way in there. And the last thing I'll say about that is, um, I think one of the things I'm pushing is for us also in the disability community is to not let the church off the hook any longer.
mm,
I think because we stayed away, and I understand it's been very difficult for a lot of people. I've had my share of difficulties. Um, but I think us staying away from the church has let the church off the hook. And
mm,
I think we're in a season now where, because of everything we saw last summer and our culture is now saying, okay, we've got to do better at diversity and inclusion. I think this is
mm,
also an opportunity for the disability community to say, okay, church, we've let you off the hook. Uh,
Mm,
as Christians, it's also our birthright to be a part of a local faith community.
mm,
And we want you to be accountable to giving us the kind of support that we need so that
mhm,
we can be a part of the faith community. Because the church is the most, in my opinion, the most underutilized resource for families
mhm,
impacted by disability. We just haven't always been very good at supporting them. So
mhm,
I think we need to not let them off the hook
mhm,
and challenge them to, we'll come with everything that you need to know and we'll teach you,
mhm,
but the church now needs to be more accountable for serving this community.
mhm. Yeah, well said. Um, yeah, yeah, you said a lot there that I am, this is why I'm so grateful we're having this conversation. I, so what I'm hearing is that, um, so much of the work is what I'm hearing kind of needs to be prompted by the families in the church context, just to let people become aware of their context. And is that true? That feels like a lot to put on families, but maybe
Yeah,
that's just our reality. I don't know. What do you think of that?
yeah, it's a hard reality, and so I don't want to suppose that all the work has to be on those families. They have enough.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. And I
yeah,
kind of didn't think that's what you were saying, but I wonder if the initiation, maybe just
yeah,
to have that first conversation.
yeah. Just the initiation
Mm-hmm.
and I think the consistency. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things I talk about in the book as it relates to disability and inclusion is that the disability rights movement is a child of the civil rights movement. So that playbook came from the civil. If you study the civil rights movement, it was African Americans and others who joined with them who had to initiate these conversations and say, we want, better housing, we want voting rights, we want,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so there was an initial push to say, we deserve better as citizens of this country. And so what I'm suggesting is that the work is not necessarily all on the families, but for the families to find their voice and to say we deserve better from the church and to hold the church accountable
Mm-hmm.
for the ways that it has failed in the past. And so I don't want anyone to misunderstand. I love the church. I consider myself an apologist for the local church, which is why I'm also very critical of the ways that we have not served this population well. But it's also meant to empower, you know, the autism community specifically and the disability community at large to say you're still very much valuable to God.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the civil rights movement, they had to say we deserve better. I want to give those families the confidence to say we deserve better. And we're not going to be accountable for doing all the work, but we will initiate the conversation and the movement to say we deserve better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and may the way be paved a bit by conversations like this, by your book, so that our church leaders will be open and more receptive to hear the input of families who are impacted. Can I ask, okay, this is a little bit of a nitty-gritty kind of educational question that I'm trying to sort out. So on Friday, it was the World Autism Awareness Day, and a couple of my friends shared a meme that had some language around autism that kind of it caught me off guard a little, and I wanted to get your opinion if you don't mind. So, someone I love, a family member, deals with bipolar disorder, and so I purposefully do not describe them as a bipolar person, but someone with bipolar um, disorder. And the meme that I saw shared on social media said those in the autism community would prefer being described as an autistic person, not a person with autism.
Mhm.
Do you agree with that? It caught me off guard.
Yeah, so it's the age old debate in the autism community about
Okay.
identity first language versus person first language.
Yeah.
Identity
Hmm.
first would be autistic person.
Mm-hmm.
Person first language would be person with autism.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to be honest with you, I use both interchangeably. You
You're the
probably,
autism pastor, so
yeah, you probably will hear me say autistic person more.
hmm.
And I think part of the reason why there's a push for that um, is because autism is unique in that it's neurological, and so what a lot of people who prefer identity first language, which is autistic person, they believe that because this is a part of my neurology, it's hard to separate that from my personhood. And so to say that I'm a person with communicates that autism is like an accessory to my
Ooh.
personhood
Ooh,
versus the fact
interesting.
that because it's my neurological makeup, it is
Yeah.
who I am. It is how I see the world. It's the makeup of who I am. You can't separate my
Mm-hmm.
neurology from my personhood. And so I think
Mm.
that's where a lot of that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to just want people to explain how they want to be identified, but you'll tend to see more adults in the autism community prefer identity first language, which is autistic person.
Okay.
Um, but I honestly I understand them both. You'll probably hear me say autistic person more,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't
Mm-hmm.
disparage anybody who prefers
Yeah.
person first
Yeah.
language either. So that's sort of a history of where that comes
Mm-hmm.
from.
That's really helpful. And I think questions like that can open up other nuance and helpful conversation, perhaps within
Mm,
the church. I've heard you even in this conversation describe the community as the disability community or differently disabled community, and um, and so I can see there could be preferences in different contexts.
yeah,
So being open and teachable sounds important.
yeah. I think just trying to honor them all without alienating people. My goal is to
Yes.
try to bring people together. And so, what I would encourage people to do is, just like you did, ask the question and be open to understanding why people view things a certain way. I
Mhm.
know for some people, disability is not a term that they prefer to use. So you hear me use it interchangeably. And even in the
Yeah.
book, I use things interchangeably as to not alienate people, but to make sure that I'm properly communicating all of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this community.
Yes, yes, that's great. I feel like I get a little choked up whenever you talk about inclusion and, not wanting to alienate anyone. I just feel that so closely that that's so important. It's so crucial.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that you've written this book and that it is being received so well. I wonder as we kind of end our conversation this morning,
Mhm.
do you have a hot tip for us? Like what's one thing, just one thing that our churches can do this next Sunday
Mhm.
to bring more inclusion into the church? Do you have any ideas?
Yeah, I kind of go back to something I alluded to, and that's, make it okay to talk about it. And
Mm,
so because, April is a month where it's a lot of focus on autism, it's a good way to find inroad to that. So it doesn't feel so much out of place, especially if you haven't been doing that prior, talking about any sort of disability at all.
mhm, mhm.
But I would say, a church is a place, most churches are places of word and table, right? So we celebrate the table, but we also celebrate, and so the word, right? And so communication is a huge part of our weekend experience.
Mm,
What is said, what is sung, what is prayed from the platform generates momentum, generates energy, generates interest, generates curiosity. And so you cannot expect your church to become more inclusive if you don't leverage the thing that the church does best, which is, you know, set a table for all to come and observe communion, but also set a place where the words that are being sung, spoken, and prayed generate some curiosity into how this intersects with my life of faith. And so
Mm.
it sounds very simple, but that's what the church does. We use our
Mhm.
words to ignite passion. We use our words to ignite curiosity. We use our words to generate interest in the things that we believe God is up to. And so use those opportunities, preach about it, um, invite families that are impacted by autism or other disabilities to share and to share their story, but not just share their story, but invite them to help shape the church. Um,
Amen. Yeah.
because those are going to be the voices that help us get better at the things that we have not. And so I would say start there, talk about it, don't shy away from it.
Mm.
If you're not an expert on it or if you don't feel comfortable, find someone who has direct experience with it. Preferably, we want to center those voices anyway. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, find an opportunity to leverage what the church does well. We are people of the word, and so use our words to ignite a passion for serving this community. And that can be
Mhm.
done as quickly as this coming Sunday. And so,
Mhm.
I'm just asking the church to do what we do. This is what we do.
Mhm.
Just add this conversation
Mhm.
to what we already do and use that to spark people's passion for being of service, not just for, but service with.
With, yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I love the reminder of just do what we do best, the church, what the church does,
Mm-hmm.
and be mindful, be inclusive in language and intentional, being the intentionality.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Lamar, for this conversation today. This has just been so inspiring and helpful. I hope it has also been helpful to you, those of you who are watching.
Mm-hmm.
Reminder of the book, Disability in the Church, published by InterVarsity Press by Dr. Lamar Hardwick. So, and check out, look up, how do people connect with you, Lamar? What's the best way?
So the best way is you can go to my website, which is autismpastor.com. And on there, it has links to my blog, links to my books, especially the newest book, links to my YouTube where you can watch sermon clips of me preaching. So just about everything that even social media you can
Mhm.
find there. But if you're looking for me specifically on social media, just look up Autism Pastor on Twitter, Autism Pastor on Facebook. And then I tell people I'm actually not really hard to find by design. So even if you just Google Lamar Hardwick, you'll
Yeah.
find you'll be able to get to me. And I try to be as accessible as I can to people to answer their
Yeah.
questions. So I'm not hard to find.
That's great. Well, I appreciate your voice on social media. We're connected on social, and I love all the stuff you're putting out into the world. So thank you for your hard work on this book and your continued voice, especially in this space of inclusion of disability community within the church. So thank you and bless your work, and grateful for you. So
Thanks
take
for
care,
having me.
everyone. Yeah, it was good. Good
Yeah.
conversation. Bye bye.
Bye bye.